Virgin bride escaped civilization straight into the arms of Alpha King who never let her go. The moon hung low over the palace, silver and silent, as if the night itself held its breath. Elara pressed her back against the cold stone wall of her chamber, listening to the distant echo of laughter and music from the banquet hall. Tonight was meant to be her wedding, a union she had never wanted. To everyone else, she was the perfect bride, noble, graceful, obedient. But inside, her heart thumped with panic and longing, a wild pulse that refused to be silenced. She had spent years watching the life of the court through golden windows, learning the rituals, the curtsies, the careful smiles that hid fear and boredom alike. She had learned how to bow when praised, how to speak when asked, and how to vanish into the crowd when no one was looking. And she had learned the hardest lesson of all, that freedom once denied could feel like a distant, aching memory. Now, on the eve of her wedding, that memory became her purpose. She slipped quietly to her wardrobe, pulling a dark cloak around her shoulders. Her fingers trembled, but not with fear alone. There was excitement in the risk, in the thought of leaving everything she had ever known. The guards were few in the quiet hours before midnight, and the palace slept beneath a heavy veil of candlelight and shadows. Elara crept past them, careful to avoid the beams of lanterns. She reached the outer gates, her heart pounding so loudly she thought it might betray her. With a deep breath, she slipped through the narrow opening she had discovered weeks before, a secret passage that led into the forest beyond the walls. The forest welcomed her like a dark, protective hand. The trees stretched tall and ancient, their branches whispering secrets in the night wind. Elara's bare feet sank into the soft earth, and for the first time in her life she felt truly unseen. She ran, letting the chill of the night wash over her, every step carrying her farther from the suffocating world of courtly rules and arranged smiles. But freedom was not as simple as escape. In the depth of the forest, shadows seemed to move with intention, and the air carried a faint otherworldly scent. Elara paused, listening. There was a presence, something alive, powerful and unlike anything she had known. Her breath quickened, part fear, part wonder. From the darkness ahead, a figure emerged. He was tall, broader than any man she had ever seen, with eyes that glowed like amber fire in the moonlight. His hair was dark as midnight, and his features were sharp, noble, and commanding. He watched her with a calm intensity that made her heart both race and still. "You should not be here," he said, his voice low, smooth, carrying the weight of authority. I needed to leave," Elara whispered, trying to keep her voice steady. "Leave? Or run?" His eyes narrowed slightly, and she felt, rather than saw, the sharpness of his judgment. I cannot stay," she admitted. "I have no choice." Then, without a word, he moved closer. The forest seemed to bend around him, shadows curling in his wake. His presence was magnetic and terrifying all at once. Elara wanted to step back, but her feet felt rooted to the earth. "You have spirit," he said finally. "Few dare to walk into the dark, knowing it may never let them return." "Who are you?" she asked, though a part of her already knew she would not be able to leave. "I am Kale," he said. "King of this forest, and more than that, ruler of a realm where mortals rarely tread. And you are not meant to be in my world." I do not know what I am meant to do. I only know I cannot live where I was." Kale's gaze softened slightly, though his power radiated around him like a shield. "And yet, here you are." The forest does not simply allow anyone to enter. It senses what is hidden inside them. The fear, the courage, the longing. It brought you to me. "I did not ask for this," Elara said, though her voice wavered. In truth, a part of her did not want to leave the forest either. The shadows here were strange, but they felt alive. They felt honest. Unlike the gilded halls she had fled, Kale stepped closer, his presence filling the space between them. "Perhaps not, but fate has its ways. The world you fled is not your prison. This forest, My kingdom is no sanctuary either. You are caught between two worlds, Alara. She shivered, not from cold, but from the intensity of his words. There was something in his eyes, a mixture of command and curiosity, that made her feel exposed, yet strangely safe. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because," Kale said, his voice lowering into a tone that resonated deep in her chest, "you may be the one to change what is broken here. Or you may be the one to break it further. Either way, you will not leave untouched." Alara's mind spun. She wanted to flee, to run deeper into the forest and never look back. And yet, the pull she felt toward Kale was undeniable. Something about him, the way he stood, the way he spoke, the raw power that seemed to bend the night itself, drew her in. She took a step back and the underbrush crunched under her feet. Kale's eyes followed her every movement, sharp and unyielding. "Do not think you have a choice," he said softly, almost kindly. "Once you step into the forest's heart, its paths will not release you easily." "And neither will I." Alara froze. The words hung in the air, a mixture of warning and promise. She realized that in her flight, she had walked directly into a new kind of captivity, not of walls and rules, but of power, expectation, and something far more dangerous, fascination. The forest seemed to lean closer, dark branches brushing against one another as if whispering secrets only they could hear. Moonlight glimmered on a hidden stream, and the reflection of Kale's amber eyes shone in its waters, steady and consuming. "I do not understand," Alara admitted. Why me?" "Why now?" Kyle tilted his head, studying her. "Because you are not like the others. You have strength they do not see. You have courage they do not test. And most of all, you have a heart that has not yet been bound by fear. That is rare. That is precious. And that is why you are here." Alara's breath caught. She wanted to deny it, to insist she was no one special, that she had only run out of fear. But deep inside, she knew he was right. Something in her had called to this darkness, had sought it out without understanding why. "And if I do not want to stay?" she asked. Kyle stepped closer, the shadows wrapping around him like silk. "Then you may run for a time. But the forest has ways of returning what it calls." "And so do I." She felt a chill run down her spine. Part of her wanted to argue, to resist, to fight for freedom. But another part, the part that had always dreamed of leaving, of something greater, wanted to follow, wanted to surrender, if only to understand what this forest and this king truly held. A sudden movement in the underbrush startled her, and she spun, ready to flee. But Kale's hand shot out, firm and unyielding, stopping her. His touch was heavy with authority, but it did not hurt, it only grounded her. "Do not fear what you do not yet understand," he said, his voice a soft rumble. "In time you will see. And in that time you will choose, or you will be chosen." Alara's heart thudded in her chest. The night around them seemed alive, whispering of old magic, old curses, and old promises. She realized, with both terror and awe, that she had left one cage only to enter another. A world of power, mystery, and a man who would not let her go. And yet, she did not resist. Not fully. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of ancient trees, wet earth, and something unnameable. Kale's eyes softened for the briefest instant, and then hardened again, as if guarding a secret he would never share. "Come," he said simply. "The night is long, and the forest waits." Alara hesitated, then stepped forward. With each step, she felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration. She did not know what awaited her, danger, magic, redemption, or despair. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Her life would never be the same. And as she followed Kale deeper into the shadows, the moon disappeared behind a cloud, leaving them in darkness. But for the first time in her life, Alara did not feel alone. The forest seemed alive in ways Ilara had never imagined. Each tree whispered secrets, each shadow seemed to watch, and the air shimmered with an energy that made her skin tingle. Kale led her through twisted paths, his presence steady and commanding, his amber eyes never leaving her. She walked carefully, unsure of the rules of this new world, but unable to resist the strange sense of belonging it gave her. They emerged from the thick forest into a valley unlike anything she had ever seen. The castle of Kale's realm rose from the mist, carved from dark stone that glimmered faintly under the moonlight. Towers twisted skyward, and walls were etched with patterns that seemed to shift when she looked away. Strange lights floated along the battlements, casting a soft glow over the surrounding forest. The place felt alive, breathing, almost sentient. "You will stay here," Kale said, his voice cutting through the still night as he gestured toward the castle. "And you will learn what it means to belong to this world. It is not a place for mortals who are afraid. You must prove yourself, or the forest will remind you of its dangers." Ilara swallowed. Her heart raced, but she met his gaze. "And if I fail?" "You will not fail," Kale said, though there was no warmth in his voice. "You may struggle, but this kingdom, this forest, it has chosen you. That choice cannot be undone." They entered through heavy doors that seemed to open on their own, welcoming them into a grand hall. Candles floated in midair, illuminating tall ceilings and walls carved with images of battles, both human and supernatural. Shadows flickered and danced along the stone as if the building itself were alive. The court of Kale's kingdom awaited them, though she had not realized she was entering one. Creatures of every kind, human and not, observed her with curious, wary eyes. Some had pointed ears or faintly glowing eyes. Others appeared almost human, though their movements held a grace she could not place.
"This is
"Your court?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Kale inclined his head. "These are my people, my allies, and my watchers. Each serves me in ways only they can. They are loyal because they have known the cost of betrayal." Whispers floated through the air, faint but curious. She felt exposed, fragile, and out of place. Yet an unexpected thrill ran through her. This was not the gilded cage of civilization. Here, power was real, raw, and visible. A figure stepped forward. A woman, pale and tall, with hair like silver moonlight and eyes as sharp as a blade, bowed gracefully. "My king," she said, "and the guest." "Do not call her guest," Kale replied, his tone firm. "She is here because she has a role to play. Her presence will shape what is to come." The woman nodded, though her eyes lingered on Ilara with careful calculation. She seemed wary, yet respectful. Ilara understood even then that the court was a place where trust was earned, not given. Kale gestured toward a private chamber. "You will rest. Tomorrow, you will learn. Do not forget, nothing in this kingdom is as it seems." Ilara followed him through corridors that twisted and shifted, as though the castle had no fixed shape. Every step made her heart pound. She wanted to run, to retreat to the forest outside, but curiosity kept her moving forward. Her chamber was large and warm, with walls lined with books and artifacts she could not name. The bed was soft, though not like the delicate pillows she had known in her palace. It felt alive, as if it had been shaped for her, waiting. Kale remained near the doorway. "Do not mistake comfort for safety," he said. "This kingdom will challenge you. It will show you fear, desire, and power beyond what you have known. But it will also teach you what courage truly means." Ilara nodded, though she did not fully understand. "And what of you?" she asked softly. "Do you not fear me? Ayanda. Doesn't curse be you." "I fear nothing, and yet everything. I have walked centuries alone, and the arrival of someone like you, it unsettles me more than I expected. You have light in you that I have not seen in a long time. But light attracts danger, and I must protect it, even if it challenges me to my core." She did not know if it was hope or fear, desire or admiration. But she knew that this king, this mysterious figure of immense power, would not let her leave, not truly. And perhaps, deep down, she did not want him to. The night passed slowly. Outside her window, the forest hummed with magic and life. She could hear the soft rustle of leaves and the faint calls of creatures she did not recognize. In the moonlight, the castle seemed less ominous, more like a living place, waiting to reveal its secrets. The next day brought lessons she could never have imagined. Kale walked with her through the courtyards, showing her the ways of the realm. She learned that every being in his kingdom had a role, a duty, and a power that could be dangerous if misused. They watched her carefully, testing her, though not openly. "Observe," Kale said, stopping at a fountain whose waters shimmered with an unnatural light. "Everything here responds to intent. Nothing is idle. Your thoughts, your fears, even your hopes. They carry weight. Do not underestimate them." Ella peered into the fountain. She saw her own reflection, but it shimmered strangely, showing a hint of what might be, stronger, braver, and yet shadowed by the unknown. A shiver ran through her. Hours passed. She struggled to understand the rules, the subtle signs, the ways the court measured loyalty and strength. Some creatures tested her politely, others with veiled threats or riddles. She learned quickly that every smile could hide a knife, every compliment could carry a demand. Yet through it all, Kyle remained beside her. Not as a mentor-master exactly, but as a constant presence. He spoke little, but his eyes were always on her, noting her reactions, her fears, her courage. And Alara began to notice the flickers of something deeper in him. Moments of vulnerability when he seemed less like a king and more like a man weighed down by centuries of duty and solitude. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Kale led her to the edge of the forest where the land fell away into a valley of mist. "Tonight," he said, "you will understand part of what you have stepped into. And you may understand why the forest called you." A soft wind rose, carrying with it the scent of ancient trees, wet earth, and something she could not name. Shadows gathered along the valley floor, and she felt the presence of beings hidden, watching. Kale stepped forward, his hand brushing hers lightly, not as a command but as a connection. "You will face trials," he said. "Not all of them will test your strength. Some will test your heart. Some will test your loyalty. And some will test your willingness to trust." "And if I fail?" Kale's eyes, golden and steady, met hers. "Then you will learn what it means to rise from failure. Every choice has consequence here. Every step changes the path ahead. You cannot turn back, not now." From the edge of the valley, figures emerged, strangers at first, but their presence carried a familiarity she could not place. Her heart lurched. Could they be someone from her past? From the life she thought she had left behind? Kale noticed her hesitation. His hand tightened around hers briefly, a silent promise of protection. "Do not fear them," he said, though his voice carried a warning. "Not all shadows are enemies. But not all are friends either." Alara swallowed, fear and anticipation twisting inside her. She realized then that the forest, the kingdom, and Kale himself were not only a challenge but also a mirror. Every moment would reflect her choices, her courage, and the heart she had thought hidden beneath layers of obedience and fear. The night deepened. The figures from the shadows drew closer, and Alara felt a strange pull. Curiosity, dread, and longing all at once. Kale's eyes never left hers, steady and unwavering, and she felt a strange comfort in his presence, even as danger approached. The wind whispered around them, carrying voices she could not fully understand. The forest seemed to hum in anticipation, alive and expectant. And in that moment, Alara understood that she had crossed into a world that would not let her remain the same. The arrival of the stranger from her past unsettled Alara more than she expected. The figure stepped out of the shadows with the same careful composure as she remembered, tall, poised, and familiar. Every step they took reminded her of the life she had tried to leave behind, The rules, the expectations, the gilded cage that had driven her into the forest. Kale's hand brushed hers, firm and steady, grounding her in the present. "Do not let them distract you," he said softly, his amber eyes locked on hers.
You are here now, in a world where your choices matter. Remember that.
She felt torn between two worlds, between what she had been and what she was becoming. And for the first time she realized that her path in Kale's kingdom would not be simple. Nothing here was simple. The stranger approached cautiously, bowing to Kale as if acknowledging his power. Their eyes flicked to Alara, sharp and calculating. "I see the forest has kept its promise," the figure said quietly.
You found him!
Kale's expression did not change. "This is not a matter for the past," he said. "Your presence is noted, but here, loyalty is earned through action, not memory." Alara felt the tension in the air. Every being in the courtyard seemed to sense the shift, their eyes flicking between the three of them. She realized that the stranger was a test, an intrusion meant to measure her resolve, her courage, and her ability to adapt to this strange, powerful world.
I will not be a pawn.
Alara said, her voice steady despite the fear curling in her chest.
I am not here for anyone else's plans but my own. Good! That strength will serve you well.
But understand this, strength alone is not enough. You will be tested in ways that require both heart and mind.
The days that followed were a whirlwind of lessons, challenges, and trials that pushed Alara to her limits.
She learned to read the subtle movements of Kale's court, to understand the ways each being wielded their power. Some tested her openly, challenging her wit and courage, while others observed silently, measuring her responses. Kale watched her closely throughout it all. Sometimes, when she succeeded against a particularly difficult challenge, she caught the faintest trace of pride in his eyes. At other times, when she faltered, he remained silent, letting her wrestle with her own fear and doubt. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the distant mountains, Kale led Alara to a hidden garden within the castle walls. The air was thick with the scent of night-blooming flowers, their petals glowing softly in the moonlight. Water trickled in a fountain at the center, and the shadows of the trees seemed to move like living things.
Here, Kale said, is a place of reflection. You will need it.
Not every test will be a battle or a puzzle. Some will challenge your heart.
Alara knelt by the fountain, staring at her reflection. She saw herself as she had been, uncertain, fearful, fleeing from a world that demanded obedience. And beside that image she saw another version of herself, stronger, wiser, and yet fragile in ways she did not yet understand. "You are changing," Kale said, his voice quiet behind her.
The forest, the kingdom, they are shaping you, and I am learning what it means to trust someone again.
Alara turned to him, her heart fluttering. "You trust me?"
Kale's eyes held a mixture of warning and hope.
I am learning, but trust is dangerous. I have walked centuries alone because I feared it, and yet you make it impossible not to try. Their moment was interrupted by a sudden commotion at the garden gates. Shadows moved quickly, and a figure emerged, cloaked and masked.
Alara's pulse quickened. Kale stepped in front of her, his presence radiating power, but the figure was fast, and the air seemed to hum with tension. "You should not have come here," Kale said, his voice low and commanding. The figure laughed softly.
You underestimate what I am capable of. And you underestimate her.
Alara realized with a start that this was not merely an intrusion. It was a challenge. And it was meant to test her as much as Kale. She felt the weight of centuries of history, magic, and power pressing down on her. And yet something inside stirred, a determination she had not known she possessed.
Step back, Kale said, though his amber eyes flicked to hers. This is your test. Show me your courage.
Alara squared her shoulders. Fear surged through her, but it was joined by something else. Resolve. She had fled from her old life to claim freedom, and now she would not shrink from the challenges of this new world. The masked figure circled them, assessing, calculating. Then, with a sudden movement, they struck. Not with weapon or spell, but with a challenge of the mind and heart.
Riddles, tests of loyalty, and subtle provocations aimed to unsettle her. Elara responded carefully, her mind sharp, her intuition guiding her.
Kale watched silently, letting her navigate the trial, his hand never leaving hers. With each correct answer, each careful choice, she felt her confidence grow, her connection to this kingdom and to Kale deepening. Finally, the figure stopped, bowing slightly.
"You are not weak," they said. "You have potential, but strength alone will not carry you far here. You must learn to balance fear, courage, and trust." The figure vanished into the shadows, leaving Elara and Kale alone in the glowing garden. "You see," Kale said, his voice low, "this kingdom will test you in ways that cannot be taught. You will stumble, you will question yourself, and you will face dangers that do not exist in the mortal world. And yet, each test will show you who you truly are." Elara nodded, her heart still racing. I want to be worthy," she said softly. "Not just for this kingdom, but for you." Kale's gaze softened, and for a fleeting moment the shadows around him seemed to lighten. "Worthiness is not a gift," he said. "It is a choice. And you are learning that. But remember, sometimes being worthy means making sacrifices you cannot yet see." Days turned into nights, and the bond between them grew. Elara discovered that Kale's strength was not just physical or magical, it was the weight of centuries of solitude, responsibility, and loss. He had built walls around his heart, walls she began to understand, respect, and, in moments, gently breach. Members of the court whispered, observing the quiet tension between the king and the newcomer. Some were curious, some wary, some jealous, and all of them tested Elara subtly, challenging her to assert herself, to claim her place, not as a guest, but as someone who belonged. One night, Kale took her to the cliffs overlooking the valley. The wind whipped around them, carrying the scent of pine and distant storms. Below, the forest stretched endlessly, dark and full of secrets. "You are learning quickly," Kale said. "But there is more to you than courage. There is something inside you that is rare, a willingness to face the unknown, even when it terrifies you."
Elara shivered.
"And what about you?" she asked. "Do you face the unknown?"
Kale's amber eyes darkened.
"I have walked in darkness longer than I can count, but even I am unsettled by you. You challenge me in ways I did not expect. You awaken something I thought was lost." Their hands brushed and the world seemed to hold its breath. The wind howled around them. The trees swayed like dancers, and the valley below shimmered with the light of 1,000 unseen stars. Before Elara could speak, a distant cry echoed from the forest, sharp and urgent. Kale's gaze snapped toward the sound. "Trouble!" he said. "And it is coming faster than we anticipated." Elara felt her pulse race, fear and anticipation twisting together. She realized that she was no longer merely a visitor in this kingdom. She was part of it, entwined with Kale, with the court, and with the very power of the forest itself. And now, a new danger approached, one that would test not only her courage but the strength of the bond she had begun to forge with the king. The forest was alive with unrest. Shadows twisted unnaturally, and the air seemed heavy with the weight of anticipation. Elara's heart pounded in her chest as she stood beside Kale at the edge of the cliffs, the wind whipping around them. The danger they had sensed in the days before had finally arrived, and it was unlike anything she had faced. Kale's amber eyes scanned the forest below. "They are coming," he said, his voice steady but tense. "And this time, it is not merely a test. It is a challenge to the very kingdom itself."
Fear had once driven her to flee, but now, standing in Kale's world, she felt something stronger. Determination. She would not run. She would face this trial, not as a frightened bride of civilization, but as someone who had claimed her place beside a king, in a kingdom both mystical and dangerous. The shadows surged forward, revealing figures cloaked in darkness. Their eyes glowed faintly, and their presence carried an unnatural chill. Kale moved in front of her, his stance protective and commanding.
You must trust yourself, Kale said, his hand brushing hers. And you must trust me. What comes next will require both.
She had learned courage in the court, patience in the trials, and strength in the quiet moments with Kale.
She was ready to act, to face what had once terrified her. The figures from the shadows advanced, and Kale raised his hand.
The air hummed with power, the forest responding to his command. Light and shadow intertwined, and the ground beneath their feet seemed to pulse with energy. Alara stepped forward, feeling a sudden clarity. She knew now that this kingdom was not merely Kale's, it was theirs together.
Every test, every challenge, every subtle observation in the court had prepared her for this moment.
She focused, and the forest seemed to listen. The shadows hesitated, as if sensing her presence, her courage, her determination. Then, with a sudden surge, the figures attacked, not with weapons, but with a force of energy that sought to overwhelm and confuse. Kale moved swiftly, deflecting the attacks with a skill born of centuries of practice. Alara followed, her movements guided by instinct and the lessons Kale had taught her. She found her courage in action, her mind sharp, her heart steady. And then she saw it, a faint glimmer in the center of the shadowed figures. A dark crystal pulsing with a strange light seemed to be the source of the attack. She realized instantly that destroying it would end the threat, but doing so would require stepping into the heart of danger. Kale's hand found hers again. "I will be with you," he said. "But this must be done by you." Alara swallowed hard, fear rising, but determination stronger. She nodded. Together they moved toward the crystal. The shadows lashed out, but she did not falter. She drew on every lesson, every moment of courage, every heartbeat of trust between her and Kale. The crystal pulsed brighter as she approached. She could feel the weight of centuries of magic pressing down on her, trying to turn her back. But she pressed on, focusing on the truth she had discovered within herself. She was not weak, she was not a pawn, and she was not afraid. With a deep breath, she touched the crystal. Light surged, bright and pure, filling the forest, the cliffs, and the valley below. The shadows screamed and dissolved, scattering like mist in the wind. The crystal cracked and shattered, its dark energy dissipating. Alara stumbled, but Kale caught her, holding her firmly. She looked up at him, fear and exhilaration coursing through her, and he met her gaze with an intensity that left her breathless. "It is done," Kale said softly. "The kingdom is free, from the curse, from the shadows. And so are you." Alara's chest heaved as she realized the weight of their victory. She had faced fear, danger, and the unknown, and she had not faltered. She had grown, changed, and discovered a strength she had never known. But the trial had also changed Kale. She saw it in his eyes, the light that had returned after centuries of shadow, the softness that appeared in fleeting moments. The king who had seemed unyielding, almost untouchable, now stood before her with something rare and human. Gratitude, trust, and the beginning of hope. They returned to the castle, the night sky clearing above them. The court, once tense and wary, gathered to witness the outcome. Alara felt their eyes on her, but she no longer felt fear. She stood tall, side by side with Kale, a symbol of courage and partnership, no longer merely a newcomer, but a part of this mystical world. In the days that followed, the kingdom began to change. Shadows that had lingered faded, creatures that had been silent began to speak, and the air seemed lighter, brighter, alive with a sense of renewal. Kale and Alara walked through the halls, observing the subtle signs of transformation, loyalty rooted in respect, trust born of shared trials, and power tempered by wisdom. Alara found herself reflecting on how far she had come. She had fled civilization seeking freedom only to enter a world of danger, magic, and responsibility. But she had discovered that freedom was not merely escape, it was courage, choice, and the willingness to face the unknown. Cale remained by her side, his presence constant, a reminder of the bond that had formed through trial and trust. They did not need words to communicate the depth of their connection. Every glance, every touch, every silent moment spoke volumes. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky with gold and crimson, Cale led Alara to the highest tower of the castle. They looked out over the valley, the forest stretching endlessly, alive and serene.
"You have changed this kingdom,"
Cale said quietly.
"And you have changed me." "And you have changed me," she said. "You taught me courage, trust, and that strength is not only about power, but about heart."
Cale's gaze softened, the amber light of his eyes warm and steady.
"I have lived centuries in shadow," he said. "And now, with you, I see that even a king can find redemption. Even a heart long hardened can find trust." They stood together in silence, the wind carrying the scent of flowers, earth, and the faint glow of magic in the air. For the first time, Alara felt wholly at peace in this world that had once seemed so foreign and frightening. She realized that the journey had not been only about survival or courage or even love. It had been about transformation. Both of them had changed, healed, and grown through the trials they had faced together. And yet, even in peace, the forest whispered of the unknown, reminding them that their story was part of something larger, eternal, and ever-changing. But for now, they had faced darkness, emerged stronger, and claimed their place in a world that had once seemed impossible. Cale reached for her hand, holding it firmly yet gently. "Together," he said, "we will face what comes next, whatever it may be." Alara nodded, her heart full, her spirit unbroken. "Together," she echoed. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the kingdom in golden light, the shadows of the past faded completely. The curse was broken! The trials had ended! And a new chapter began, not just for the kingdom, but for two hearts bound by courage, trust, and the promise of an enduring bond. They stood on the tower, hand in hand, looking out over the valley that stretched endlessly before them. The wind whispered around them, carrying the scent of life, renewal, and the quiet magic of hope. For the first time, both felt it fully, the freedom to be themselves, the courage to face the unknown, and the love that had grown slowly, silently, and fiercely between them. And in that moment, the world seemed infinite, full of possibility, and entirely theirs to shape together.